third week of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. I'm Drew Dinkmeyer here with Mike Gallagher to walk you through the injury report each and every Monday through Friday at 2 o'clock Eastern here and talk about the fantasy nations for tonight's DFS slate. So, Mike, we have, let's see, what is it, like a 9-game slate tonight? Something like that?
I think it's 8.
Pretty big. 8, okay, 8 for Monday. I've had some counting errors today. The props auditing team found out I was $10 ahead of our total profits, so they've knocked me down. So I'm again another 10% high here. All right, 8 games. The big news that we were hit with earlier today that really moves the needle on the slate a ton is Joel Embiid. So Embiid is out. It was originally for rest, and then they indicated he's in health and safety protocols. And from a DFS perspective, we kind of know what this means, right? Like Andre Drummond is just way underpriced for life without Joel Embiid, and he's going to be a great play. But we also know that the 76ers are kind of ravaged with the health and safety protocols. So what do you think the rotation is going to look like tonight? Is this like a 8-9 man situation? Possibly. It's a front end of a back-to-back, right? So we would think they'd lengthen it out as much as they could.
Yeah, Embiid was supposed to rest today, but now he's going to rest for potentially 10 days if he doesn't pass 2 negative tests in the next 24 hours. But yeah, Drummond's going to play a ton. Doc Rivers likes his passing. We know he's a beast on the glass. He's not been terrible on the rebounding. Steals, blocks. He's like a really, really hard fade. Against the Knicks defense has been pretty bad overall. So yeah, he'll be awesome. Interesting matchup against Julius Randle, especially missing some of their defensive pieces in the front court. They could put Tybo on him a little bit, but he's out too. So, maybe they start Paul Reed, go big, mix him up, put him behind Drummond. Maybe they bring Charles Bassey in the mix because they don't want him on the 8-man rotation. Danny Green is still questionable, just had tightness. He didn't have a straight pull. He just had discomfort, and they took him out. They just took him out as a precaution, given his age. Doc Rivers has even called him old. So that's probably we should expect him back today, which helps their wing depth. So we'll probably get Maxey starting, playing a ton of minutes. He's played 44 and 45 in the last 2. Moving Shake to the Shake's been playing better defense. Doc trusts him. Doc says Shake wants to guard guys. He might start still. And obviously, Curry's going to chuck with so much usage going around. So against a not great Knicks defense, there's so much Sixers you're going to want to play tonight.
Yeah. So the big question for me around Philadelphia is simply like, how deep does the rotation go? Because we've seen like Maxey play 44 in consecutive games, but on the front end of a back-to-back, you wonder if they will be willing to push that. Noticed some small things on the injury report. Jaden Springer was not listed on it as assigned to the G League, so he will be with the team. And that certainly opens up another guard spot that they could potentially throw minutes at. You mentioned the idea of maybe playing Charles Bassey some. If they did that and traded Paul Reed as a power forward, then they have like 10 guys. Will they play a full 10-man? I don't think so. I think even if they split Bassey and Springer and had 10 guys in, it would be effectively a 9-man at the biggest. But the real question is it a 9-man or is it an 8-man? Because if it's an 8-man, then you get into situations where I would project Maxey for like 40 minutes tonight. I would project Shake for like low 30s. And so the difference between 8 and 9 is kind of a big deal. And in terms of like seeking out value on these guys. And I think we'll get a hint at that by the starters. So you mentioned the idea of maybe starting Paul Reed. I think if they start Paul Reed at the power forward spot, it's a 9-man rotation. Like it has to be. Because I don't think they would start Paul Reed with his foul issues going up against Randall as the power forward with the idea that he's also Andre Drummond's primary backup center. I don't think they do that. If they start Niang or if they continue to start Shake, something like that, I think there's a chance it's an 8-man rotation. And so that's really the thing here in terms of understanding these Philadelphia guys, because the range on Maxey is going to be really wide based on whether it's an 8-man or a 9-man rotation. He's going to play a lot, but the difference in projecting him at 36 minutes and the difference of projecting him at 40 minutes is a big deal, right?
Yeah.
So similarly with Shake, I think the things that I know about them, I think Drummond's going to play like 33 to 34, 32 to 35, let's say, somewhere in there. I think that leaves, a dozen or so minutes as a backup center that I think can either go to Reed and Bassey, some combination. They could even play some small with Niang. The Knicks have some center issues as well, with both Mitch Robinson and Nerlens Noel questionable on the injury report. I think their presence might impact how this game plays as well, in terms of how deep you get into those Bassey Reed minutes at center. And then I think you've got Danny Green is probably going to be mid-20s. I'd be surprised if they just let Danny Green go into the 30s. I think they have enough depth to cover that. The question is, are they covering that with like a few Jaden Springer minutes, or are they covering that with just tons of Maxey and Milton again? And that's where I think really the questions on Philadelphia come from an injury perspective. And so if you're thinking about continuing to fire at Maxey and Milton with these really hefty minutes workloads that they've been having of late, just understand that there is potentially one more body in the mix that could bring those minutes down a little bit. They're still going to play a lot, but it might not be 44 and it might not be 34 for Shake. It might be 38 and 30 or 28 or something like that.
Yeah, still pretty good in a spot. I think they're going to be able to score some points. Obviously, their offense has been the best in the NBA, but taking Embiid out of the mix and Tobias, they're going to have to struggle. But yeah, let's hit the Knicks really quick. Noel's listed with a back injury, and Tom Thibodeau said he's still working his way back from that knee injury. So new injury, I mean, you kind of think he probably sits, and then you got a hip flexor for Mitch. So probably pretty decent chance that they are missing at least one of these guys, which both would be, oh my God, they're in deep trouble. How many minutes? And Taj Gibson would probably be on the board. And oh my God, what is Drummond going to do to him? Jericho Sims would probably play some. Probably have to see some. They'd probably match Randall at the 5 with Toppin when they go small against either Paul Reed or George Yang.
Right.
So there's a lot of ways they can kind of spin this with Thibodeau on this back-to-back. Kept most of the minutes in check. Kemba will probably play a little bit more after he got rested yesterday. And Rose's minutes didn't get too high either. So we saw Quentin Grimes get minutes yesterday. As Thibodeau was not happy with how his team played last night.
Yeah, that game got out of hand towards the end as the Cavaliers were just flame throwing from 3 all night long. But I do think the removing Embiid along with the Knicks center injury concerns just brings in more lineup combinations. And so some of these guys like Alec Burks, Emmanuel Quickly, who have had Obi Toppin, who have had their minutes limited by the depth of the Knicks roster early in the season, there's more paths that this could open up a little bit more for each of these guys to add on like 3-4 minutes from where they were previously. That's probably not going to be enough to put them in play outside of like really, sprinkle MME type situations. But it is in the realm of possibilities, specifically if we lost both Mitch and Noel. But even if we just lose one of them, because there's a chance that they feel more comfortable with Julius at the 5 or Toppin at the 5, as opposed to Sims as the backup in those situations. So that would open up potentially more playing time for Burks quickly. And then, as you said, Kemba, Fournier, like all those guys get a little bit higher ceiling as well.
Yep.
Anything more to add there?
No, I think we covered that one. That's certainly
Okay.
the big game. I just want to address the back-to-backs. Mentioned both these teams are in back-to-backs. Also have the Nets. Their injury report's clean. A lot of minutes from Harden yesterday. A lot of minutes from Durant yesterday. I would keep an eye on that. Not a great match. The Bulls have played pretty good defense. Hawks on a back-to-back. So we've been expecting rest for the Hawks. Nate is back to his lying ways. Nasty Nate. He lied to me all the time in his Pacers days, and he's lying again. Warriors on a back-to-back. They did not need to play their guys last night, so that's important to note. I love their matchup today for the perimeter guys. Despite how the Hawks defense is perceived to be good, they've been weak against guarding some perimeter players. Kings on a back-to-back. And it's worth noting too that the Warriors and Kings and Hornets aren't traveling. The Hornets have the LA back-to-back. Kings and Warriors are also home. So I don't think the back-to-back is quite normal context. A lot of times, usually it's a road home thing back-to-back. So that's going to help the guys. But Warriors at the top of the list after the minutes got checked down last night. They were actually hoping they would be for this pretty big game for them. But, yeah, bottom line, Curry should be good. I love Poole's matchup tonight. And then the Kings should be pretty good.
Yeah.
LaMelo had some comments about Borrego not playing him. Borrego talked about the fouling too. So just kind of wanted to cover the back.
I don't think there's too much on the back-to-backs to worry about, with the exception of the teams that haven't posted their injury reports. You could always have something come up as a surprise that you're not expected for. But we'll continue to manage that. I think the team to be probably the most concerned of those groups would be the Hornets, just because they did extend their guys quite a bit last night, and they're already a little bit shorthanded. So just they're the one team that, maybe they could expand the rotation a little bit tonight.
All right, Plumlee was on the injury report yesterday. Played through it, didn't play all that great either. I'm probably not expecting PJ Washington back.
And then in terms of new out situations to touch on, let's go back to Phoenix. That one's pretty straightforward because we've seen it now.
Mm-hmm.
DeAndre Ayton has missed now 2 of the last 3 games. He played a game in between that we were surprised that he played, and then basically didn't come out of it feeling very good. He's already been ruled out tonight. So we go back to the Frank Kaminsky and JaVale McGee center tandem role that has been pretty profitable so far from a DFS perspective. Both those guys have been cheap. Kaminsky's been the one who's played really well, and I think earned more minutes than they would normally give him because he's played so well. So I think we started out with this rotation projected somewhere around McGee 22 and a half, and Frank 25 and a half. And we've ended up with JaVale playing 18 to 19 and Frank up to the upper 20s. And so I think this is a spot where you're going to see Frank be the most popular player from a DFS perspective. But I think actually on the minutes side, I think JaVale is actually a little bit more likely to see minutes growth from where he's played the last few days.
Yeah, they ran Kaminsky out there because he was running hot. Monty even said so. They're trying to keep JaVale's minutes stints short, but he's still getting quite a few stints. So, yeah, I really like the spot for him against a team that's going to want to attack the rim against them. Obviously, there'd be a lot of buddy chucking. But, yeah, I think McGee's in a really good spot here. People are going to be going towards Frank, so you guys will talk more about that later. But I'm really into McGee. Yeah, sorry, my parents' dog is a maniac barking. But, yeah, I think that it's pretty straightforward.
Let's go to Denver, where Michael Porter Jr. is going to be out tonight. This one is interesting because Denver's obviously they're a team that has a deep roster, but they're not deep on scoring options. And the loss of Jamal Murray coming into the season really put pressure on their ability to generate offense. And so now it's a situation where without Michael Porter Jr., without Jamal Murray, and going up against a Heat defense, you're like, oh man, how is this team going to facilitate offense? And the answer is probably just going to be a ton of Jokic, right? But the only other guy on the team, well, I shouldn't say the only other guy on the team, the guys who are most comfortable on the team in terms of being able to create their own offense are Will Barton, and then I'd say Bones Highland, and Aaron Gordon. Those are the guys who could potentially pick up secondary usage from Michael Porter Jr.'s absence. Some of those guys like Barton and Gordon should pick up more minutes as well. I'm interested to see against the Heat, who tend to play small-ish second units, how that shakes up the big rotation for Denver. Because if you think about the minutes that they're trying to replace for Michael Porter Jr., those are mostly small forward minutes, but they don't really have a lot of small forwards on the roster. Will Barton can fill that role. PJ Dozier can play up into that role as well because he's a bigger guy. But do they instead go down with Jeff Green, who has played that position at his point in the career, or do they fill it by going up with some of the guards, opening up more playing time for Campazzo, Morris, Bones Highland, maybe even Austin Rivers gets in the rotation, those types of different things. I think that's interesting here in terms of how it plays. But from a DFS perspective, because it's against Miami, really good defense, I think you're pretty focused in terms of the opportunities on, Jokic is going to absorb a ton of offense and carry a big usage rate here. And then Barton primarily as the guy, and then maybe Aaron Gordon gets his minutes extended as well. But how do you think this shakes up the Denver rotation?
Yeah, you pretty much hit most of it. So we saw that second quarter overlap. MPJ got hurt early in the first quarter, so we saw some early Facu Morris overlap in the first half. Going to expect to see at least some of that today. And I think he said he liked PJ Dozier after the game, and we saw him start the third quarter. So I think Dozier makes sense, especially if they're going to want another perimeter defender against Lowry. Maybe you put PJ Dozier on him. Don't put as much pressure on Monte Morris, who's also probable with that knee thing. So I think it makes sense to start him. And then you could either put Will Barton on PJ Tucker and kind of go that way. I think that makes the most sense to me. But I mean, like you said, they might just go full on, start Will Barton. Maybe even start Bones. I think that's kind of an underdog thing to look at. But Dozier's going to get some pretty good minutes. I don't know if I really think they're going to want to lean into going bigger. I think that Malone likes that, smaller stuff on the outside with Jokic. And just one other thing to add, I mean, what a bad time to lose Michael Porter Jr. Miami gives up the most threes of any team in the NBA, and you're losing your best perimeter shooter. So there's just so much on Jokic there.
Yeah.
If he has anything close to a bad game, it could get ugly.
I'll tell you the reason I think it's almost very, very little chance they start Bones is because I think they are going to start a defensive oriented player in that spot simply because they can't afford to, like, the staggering would be a problem. They need offense in the second unit. They're going to have to stagger Barton and Jokic heavily in this game just to be able to create offense in the second unit. And I think having Bones kind of in that second unit, they can stagger him with Barton and get a little bit more out of that. Whereas if they put them all in the starting lineup together, that second unit is going to be a disaster.
It already is.
It's already a real challenge.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to start PJ Dozier and put him on Jimmy. And I think that they'll try to ease a little bit of, well, actually, I don't know if they go him on Jimmy or Duncan.
I think Gordon would be on Jimmy, and then you put PJ Dozier on Lowry and go that way.
And then who do you have on Duncan Robinson? I think they want.
Just have Will Barton chase him around or put.
I think they want.
I mean,
Barton
Duncan's not really a hard guard; it's the energy you need to have to chase him around.
Yeah, I think they want Barton on Tucker because I don't think they want. Yeah. I don't think they want Will Barton chasing him around. So that's my guess on how these things shake out. I think there's more minutes upside for Gordon, but it's a tough matchup. Like all the things Aaron Gordon does well, Miami just doesn't really give in. Rebounding and they allow shooting. That's not really his thing. Shots at the rim are his thing. Transitions his thing. Like I think it's a tough matchup. So this will be a tough spot for Denver. I'm interested to see from a DFS perspective how utilized Jokic is by the field. Probably not at all with Drummond and McGee and Kaminsky, because he's gonna be asked to carry a lot. Whether he can do it in this matchup will be seen. But I think that's a really big one. We've been looking at this Denver situation all morning from a props perspective to try to figure out where to fire on things.
Yeah, and to add to that, if they are going to start Dozier, which should be clear, I think that's by far the favorite. You're talking about taking the best defender in that second unit, and then taking that second unit has been getting destroyed with Dozier. Yeah. So if you're subbing him in with Bones or Austin Rivers, however you want to talk about it, like, man, Hero is going to cook them in that time, I feel like.
Yeah, and speaking of Hero in the Heat, Max Strus was originally listed as questionable. They ruled him out briefly right before we got on the show here. So we've seen this for the last few games with Miami, but just they have a lot of confidence in Strus. They don't have a lot of confidence in the other pieces, like it's Caleb Martin. No, Cody
Martin. Yes,
Caleb Martin is on Miami. They don't have as much confidence in Caleb as they do Strus. So you've seen a little bit higher ceiling for like Lowry and Hero and Jimmy and those guys because they just don't have, and Duncan, because they don't have as much confidence. So I think Tyler definitely could cook that second unit. His price is really high because he's been playing great all season long, but I could definitely see that. Other questionables that are like the big ones on the slate, back to the Lakers, man. We're doing it again. Anthony Davis questionable season. We know LeBron is still out. Oh man, like if AD doesn't play, like we've been betting so many unders on Lakers this year that I've been forced to watch so much of the Lakers offense, and it might be worse than OKC games, man. It's tough. It just looks like Russell Westbrook trying to will the ball into the basket every possession, and he's unable to do so. So what do you think the likelihood of AD playing tonight is? Because I think this is a huge one for the slate as well.
I think it's very high. He had that thumb sprain 2 games ago, and then he was game to play. And Vogel said he got cleared pretty easily, but he threw up 4 times before the game started. That was not on the injury report, and we saw AD not return after the short stint. So, I mean, what did he eat? Was it A.J. Brown Chipotle bad, where it's going to affect him for a week, or we don't really know. So, I think he's going to play. He's listed for the thumb, so maybe he's over that stomach illness. Again, stomach illness is sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's a week. We'll see. But I'm expecting him to play. And what's a really good matchup? Pace-up game. Yeah. Hornets allow a lot of interior stuff from guards, a lot of drive. So it's a perfect spot for Westbrook to go off against a pretty small interior defense. So I mean, you really couldn't pick a better spot for him, even if AD plays. So I really like him. The Lakers defense is bad. They're giving up the most shots at the rim, or some of the most 3-point shots. They're giving up all dunks and threes. Like, could you be worse at picking your shot selection against? So, yeah, really good game environment. Another Hornets are on the back-to-back, but I think this should be pretty close. And they're underdogs, so they might even be able to beat him as a road dog.
Yeah, it's been a profitable approach to just bet against the Lakers all season long. And this, you would think, like, if the Hornets weren't on a back-to-back here, man, like, you would think a young, pace-hungry team would just destroy an old, veteran-laden team with basically like one guy that likes to play at pace and nobody else that's like comfortable playing at pace. So I think this is obviously the biggest news on the slate. It's a late game. I don't know if we'll get it. In terms of preparing, if we don't get it, what do you think the lineups look like for the Lakers if Anthony Davis does not play?
I mean, it'd probably be Melo, right?
Who started the second half last game.
Yeah, so it'd be Melo, Jordan, Bazemore, Avery Bradley, Westbrook. I feel like that's kind of the only. I didn't change this depth chart. Sorry, I focus on getting our subs right, so I don't really do the depth charts all that much. But so it would almost certainly be Melo in there, I would think, just because they don't really have anybody else to really go to. But again, just to be very, very clear, I think AD plays. Yeah.
And it's an interesting situation.
Actually, Sekou Doumbouya is questionable from the two-way. I don't think that really matter, but
I think it's clear that if AD's not playing, Sekou's playing.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
Like they need the body. So I do think we've talked about in the past how if AD doesn't play, they would have to cover the full 48 center minutes, basically with DeAndre and Dwight in those situations. That's pretty much how they approached it against Portland, but that's against Nurkic and against Zeller. I don't know if that would be the straight case against Plumlee and Richards or Bridges or whoever they choose to throw at the center spot. That being said, it's pretty difficult to put lineups out there when like Melo's your center because there's no resistance to the rim whatsoever. So I think if AD was out, you would probably get 48 minutes of Dwight and DeAndre just because like I think they're too thin elsewhere to handle it. Now they've got Wayne Ellington back, they've got Doumbouya available, so they have bodies now, but I don't think they have bodies that they'd feel comfortable with playing these types of lineups. So I think those guys would emerge as like late swap pivots off of McGee, Kaminsky situations if you're behind. If Anthony Davis is ruled out, and obviously Russ would project really well.
AD probable just hit.
Okay, there we go. So we've just wasted a lot of time, which is part of the content business and grind of NBA season, is just wasting a lot of time. All right, let's move to the other big questionables on the slate. D'Angelo Russell with Minnesota is questionable. We have him projected in. He returned to practice over the weekend, right?
He did. Yep. So again, it wasn't really a bad ankle sprain, so there was never really any concern that it was more of a day-to-day thing. So definitely expected him back, which kind of affected rotation. And it's important to note that Finch likes to play at least two defensive guys. So while they don't play the same position, this hurts Malik Beasley just a little bit in a pace-up game too. So this game environment's really, really good. The Memphis defense is really, really bad. So I don't know if you could play D'Angelo on the first spot here, but Anthony Edwards is still going to get a ton of minutes. I really like his matchup. We'll see what they do with Josh Okogie. And then to add to it, too, you're going against Jaren Jackson and Steven Adams. So you would think Vando starts in a double big lineup next to Cat, and then probably throw Jaden McDaniels on John Morant, interestingly. And then you'd have the two wings and guards going against Melton and Bain.
Yeah. That one would be interesting too, because I actually wonder if they would throw Jared Vanderbilt on Adams and have Cat on Jaren Jackson in those situations.
Yes.
Because we've been aggressively betting Jared Vanderbilt under on rebound props, and he's beaten us with a rebound before a sub in each of the last two games. There's a little bit wider range of outcomes to the upside for Vanderbilt in this specific situation, both from a rebounding perspective, but also from a playing time perspective because of the size of Memphis. So something to keep an eye on there. And then in terms of other questionables, Brandon Ingram is questionable. We thought he was going to return. I mean, we thought he's going to return for like 3 games now, and it just hasn't happened. It seems like they are just in super cautious mode because they understand where their season is going here. But what do you think of Ingram's chances of coming back tonight?
Yeah, we didn't have evidence in the last 2 games of anything progressing. He was just game time. He was game time 2 games in a row. Usually the progression is game time miss, and then next time you're game time, you're good. Missed another one. Did practice. Apparently looked good. I believe Andrew Lopez from ESPN said he looked good. Should play. So that changes things on multiple fronts. One, you're swapping out a defensive guy who you put in there for Brandon Ingram, who's terrible at defense. Josh Hart's will still get a ton of minutes, but these Garrett Temples, other wings like that, Kyra Lewis will lose some usage, Nakia will lose some usage, Devontae Graham, against a Dallas team that's surprisingly been really good at limiting 3-pointers. So this is going to be either way. Like, my God, Joe Val, he's got 2 days to rest. He is going to be feasting today. Especially if Ingram is even remotely limited. Hasn't played about I want to say 10 days since he's played a game. Yeah. So it could be major Joe Val time.
Yeah, I think that from a DFS perspective, the thing to just always remember is when you've had a situation for a few games where a star player has been out, usually that's been enough time for the sites to kind of adjust the pricing to the players who would have benefited. So when they come back, it's almost always a situation where there's not really a lot to play or attack because almost everybody is usually overpriced in that scenario when you bring the big star player kind of back into the equation. So just something to be mindful of there. In terms of other questionables, the only other kind of little questionable that I wanted to walk through, we talked about Danny Green with Philadelphia a little bit when talking about Embiid. Let's talk about Zaire Williams with Memphis. I don't know how much it impacts things there because Memphis is always pretty consistent with wanting to play a 10-man rotation. And they've got John Concar, who they can basically just sub in for those minutes, or Brandon Clark, like depending on the matchup, the big versus small, like how they go. But do you think Zaire Williams is going to play tonight? And do you think it impacts the Memphis rotation in a meaningful way?
Yeah, I don't think it'll impact it much. We're talking about, low teens minutes. So, yeah, they would just shift guys around, play bigger. It definitely helps Kyle Anderson's ceiling a little bit more to not have to worry about him. Same with Jaren Jackson. He'd have a little bit more of a ceiling, too. Whoever they insert in that 10th man rotation spot, just because they could flip so many different positions. Yeah. Maybe you also get a little bit more Tyus Jones overlap with John Moran. So there's a lot of ways they can kind of fill it. And not really sure which way. There's a lot of ways. It may just be game flow. So I wouldn't be, attacking it based off that news.
Yeah. All right. Anything that I missed on the injury report that you want to touch on?
No, I guess just super quick on Sexton, just because people are here. So a meniscus tear, usually it's 4 to 6 weeks for a medial meniscus, 6 to 8 for a lateral. That's for the cleanup and not the removal. So he could get the removal and miss a really long amount of time. So he's definitely going to be missing months here with a meniscus tear. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. But just to throw that out there for the quick diagnosis and how much time we're expecting on Sexton.
Yeah. So there you have it. Cavs get thinner. Thin backcourt gets thinner. Unfortunately, they've been playing great basketball. It's been really fun to watch early in the season. But that'll do it for Monday's edition of the Established Run NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. We'll be back again tomorrow at 2:00 Eastern to cover a small, I believe, 3-game slate tomorrow night. If you are subbed to Established Run in the DFS package, we'll see you again at 5:00 Eastern today to go over the DFS show, prepping us for the 8-game slate. If you're not subbed, I have no idea what you're doing. We did put out some content on the props package and you can check out the Established Run NFL Twitter account, Adam Levitan's Twitter account, basically on like how we go through the prop process and what we've been doing with betting props. It's been really profitable so far. We've hit 67% of our first 129 bets that we've put out there during the course of 19-20 NBA days. I think we're running a little bit hot. I think we're also taking a little bit of advantage of softer lines early that will correct over time, but we can generate a lot of edge. And I think the betting player props like article that we released today that goes into some of the process of looking at one of the football props and articulates some of the strengths of how it improves our projections long-term, kind of doing all these things, is really useful. So check that out. It's a free piece of content. If you're thinking about subscribing to either our DFS side or the prop side, I think it gives good credence to why you should continue to think through doing so and ultimately hit that purchase button. While you're hitting buttons, might as well hit the subscribe button over there on the Established Run NBA YouTube page. Make sure to continue to subscribe to this page so you'll get notifications whenever we go on air. Support the work that we're doing, that we're putting out there for free, and we'll continue to get you guys up to speed on the injury report each and every day. We'll see you next time tomorrow, 2 o'clock Eastern. Best of luck in all your games tonight, guys.